Hi, my name is Casey Thomas, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Behavioral and Community Health Sciences in the School of Public Health. And today I'll be presenting on the high incidence and racially disparate use of discipline in Louisiana public schools and how this relates to implicit bias. Believe it or not, school discipline measures such as suspension and expulsion are now widely considered public health crises due to their association with absence, dropout, and even contact with the justice system. In Louisiana specifically, the rates of suspension and expulsion are among the highest in the nation. And although Black students account for less than half of public school enrollment in the state, they represent more than 2/3 of all suspensions and expulsions. There is no evidence that this overrepresentation is due to higher rates of transgressive behavior among Black students. In fact, research shows that Black students are often subject to higher rates of severe punishment for less serious and more subjective infractions than their white peers. Increasingly, research implicates the role of unconscious bias in school discipline responses to Black students. The objective of this study was to assess the parish-level associations between racial disparities in school discipline and implicit racial biases. To conduct this research, we collected secondary data from two sources. The first of these sources was the Louisiana Department of Education, which publishes an annual report of the rates of suspension and expulsion for every public school in the state. Using these data, we assessed disparities in the proportion of Black students suspended or expelled relative to white students. Our second data source was the Harvard University Implicit Association Test, which is a nationally standardized assessment that measures the test taker's unconscious biases. Positive scores on this test demonstrate a pro-white, anti-Black bias, while negative scores reflect the opposite. Using multi-level regression modeling, we examined the parish-level differences in suspension and expulsion rates as associated with implicit association test scores for all Louisiana parishes during the years 2015 to 2019. Our final analysis included a total of 10,652 test scores from the implicit association test. The majority of these scores were positive, which, as I mentioned previously, demonstrates a pro-white, anti-Black bias. After adjusting for age, race, and gender, our models showed significant positive association of implicit bias test score with a disparity in the proportion of in-school suspension rates for Black students relative to white students. At the center of our poster, you'll see we've displayed two maps. The first map shows the difference in proportion of in-school suspension among Black students as compared to white students. In this map, lighter colors represent greater difference. The second map just below shows the average implicit bias test scores for all respondents in the state. In this case, lighter colors reflect a stronger pro-white, anti-Black bias. The results of our research suggest that racial biases may be influencing disciplinary decisions in Louisiana public schools. Education is a known social determinant of health. It's predictive of morbidity, health behavior, economic outlook, and life expectancy. The centrality of education to shaping an individual's future is what makes the threat of school discipline so significant. As measures that exclude children from regular classroom instruction, suspension and expulsion represent barriers to education and all of its lifelong benefits. To address the high incidence and racially disparate use of school discipline, there are several measures that Louisiana schools can consider. To begin, they should engage in deliberate efforts to collect, analyze, and make transparent their school discipline data. And using these data, they can develop clear practical benchmarks to track reduction in biased practices. They may also consider convening a diverse coalition of stakeholders to improve the school community's cohesion. In addition, they may consider providing ongoing training and supports for not only staff, but students and families. And finally, they should seek to replace punitive disciplinary responses with restorative alternatives so that students can learn and adopt pro-social behaviors all while remaining in the classroom. Our research showed implicit bias at the parish level was significantly associated with racial disparities in-school suspension during 2015 to 2019. In general, students who are subject to school discipline are at substantially higher risk for negative life outcomes. So by administering discipline differentially across racial groups, schools are also differentially distributing life prospects. Our findings suggest a need for further scrutiny of how and why Louisiana public schools administer discipline. By understanding and reducing disparities in suspension and expulsion, schools can begin to promote the educational equity of all students. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.